The last speaker now is Thomas Lacroix. Thomas is a geographer and a CNRS research director. He is based at the Maison Française d'Oxford. He researches transnationalism, integration, and development. Currently, his research focuses on local government of international migration. He is a researcher affiliate at Migranter, Université de Poitiers, and CERI, Centre d'études de recherche internationale at Sciences Po Paris, a member also of CIMigration. Thomas edited with Amandine Dessy, a collective international migration and local governance, a global perspective at Belgrave Macmillan Press 2018. Please, Thomas, it's your turn.
Thank you, Michel. Right. Can you, yeah, right. Yeah, now the title is appearing. So thank you very much. So yeah, this is the first and third and last presentation of this panel, and we shifted rather abruptly, I would say, from the Canadian cities to French countryside. And so now I'm trying to, in a feedback loop, to go back to North America with by drawing a comparative perspective between what's going on in Europe and North America. All right, so this research I'm going to present, it's some preliminary results from a research we are undertaking with, we are piloting this project with Bénédicte Michalon, which is called Localacc, and Bénédicte and Cyril have just presented you some of the aspects of this research, and one important axis is a collection of case studies on what's going on in various settings, like small villages, from small villages to large cities in France and abroad as well. We have also had a series of case studies in Portugal, in Italy, in Spain, and so on and so forth. But another important axis of our research focuses on networks and city networks, actually. So these the international extensions of these local actions. Right. For doing so, we have put together, sorry, next slide, please. Yeah. We have put together a database which covers something like 64 migration-related city networks. Well, migration-related city networks, it includes, of course, the sanctuary cities that has been mentioned by Mireille, but also we are interested in networks focusing on integration issues, anti-racism, so all sorts of migration-related issues, not only the welcoming of immigrants. So, but still 64 migration-related networks around the world. It's a truly global phenomenon. It's you have also instances in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. But most of them, I would say, it's mostly a Western phenomenon. Half of these networks are located either in Europe or in North America. The literature as well, the literature is largely focused on these two areas, and mostly one of the big axes of research is about the articulation, the relation between these local policies and the national level. And the literature has pointed out what we call a decoupling between the local and national policies regarding the management of immigrant populations. So what I'm going to present today, and I'm trying to show that this decoupling is largely true in the US, but not so true in Europe. At least it has to be nuanced. I want to shed light on the importance of the context in the development of these city networks, and we will see that these two areas display very different configurations. So in the first part, I will present these two configurations, and then I will try to explain their respective evolution, their difference, and also their recent convergence. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Right. So as you can see, we have tried to visualize, to represent these networks with a network analysis software, which is called QGIS. And what we found out is that in Europe, these networks are extremely intertwined. There are strong interconnections between the different networks, and they also have strong interconnections between the countries. These networks expand beyond the national level and reach out to other European countries. Whereas in North America, these networks are mostly country-based. There can be strong connections between the city networks within Canada and within the US, but very limited connections between the two countries. So the sanctuary city movement in Canada, which has been presented by Mireille, is only one of the example of Canadian city networks. There are a few other ones. And also today, well, I will mostly present the US case as a complement to what has been said earlier. Right. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. Right. Next slide, please. Yeah. All right. So when we delve into the data of this database, we can highlight one common point. The first one of this common point is that in both cases, the emergence of these networks is a relatively recent phenomenon, right? Dating back mostly from the 2000s, and with an acceleration after 2010, and mostly, especially in Europe, 2015, of course, is a crucial moment with the arrival of these refugees from Middle East and Africa, and it triggered. We could identify 7 networks which were created in 2015 only. So it is a really important turning point. But you will see that there is a converging trend in North America, with an important number of for creation of networks since 2010. But when we look into their activities, these activities that we have identified, I have tried to rank these activities from the less politicized to the more policy-oriented ones. And what we can see is that there is a common point, of course, and in both cases, they really focus on knowledge exchange. Of course, one of the primary functions of this knowledge is to allow the conditions and to create the condition of a conversation between the members around migration issues. But what we can see is that in Europe, these networks are slightly less politicized, focusing on research, policies, and project funding as well. Whereas in the US, it's really about policy recommendations. So the design and the formulation of policy models that can be adapted by the members. Back to it in the questions if you want. So why do these both situations diverge? So next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, it's coming up. No, not this one. Can I have the following slide? Okay. Yeah, thank you. Great. Okay, so in the US, I would say that the conflict or the divide between the federal and the local level is a very long-standing one. Actually, it started right since the beginning of the creation of the USA, its independence, and with actually at the beginning of American history, it was the cities who had the capacity to regulate the immigrations in this country. And it's only from the mid-19th century onward that the federal state started to have some legitimacy in the regulation of entries in the US. And with this decision of the US Supreme Court, which asserts the plenary powers of the federal government to regulate migration. And it's only in the early 20th century, in 1911, I think, that the federal government had a full-fledged administration able to manage the regulation of immigration. So it's a long-standing dispute, and I must say that until, well, during the 19th century, it was the federal government which had a more liberal leaning toward migration, whereas the cities, especially the eastern coast cities, were much more restrictive and security oriented. Of course, now it's the contrary. And since the 80s, there is a trend among the sanctuary movement among the American cities. The first one was San Francisco, and we were in the context of the arrival of refugees from Central America, fleeing the civil war, for example, in Guatemala, in San Salvador. And of course, for obvious reasons, we were in the Cold War, and for policy reasons, the Reagan administration refused to acknowledge these people the status of refugees, and the cities took a stand against this decision and decided to grant them the services and to regard them as full-fledged refugees. This situation, this divide, increased and widened during the 2000s, and of course since the Trump presidency. I just wanted to flag up the creation in 2009 of Welcoming America, which is actually an association, an NGO, which helps support the cities in designing their own welcoming policy. So just to flag up the importance, the crucial importance of civil society organization in fostering and supporting the formation of migration-related city networks. And of course, during the Trump presidency, the division, the tensions between the federal and the city level governments came to a climax, with the Trump administration suing some of the sanctuary cities and sanctuary states in order to suppress and to constrain these sanctuary policies. Next slide, please. Right, so Europe, it's a completely different context. Of course, it's a much more recent phenomenon, and which has its roots in the building of a European political space in the 90s. After the Maastricht Treaty, the cities, the local governments try to foster and to create their own voice and their own space within this political policy architecture. So the European Commission designed two institutions, the European Committee for Municipality and Region on the one hand, and the Assembly of Regions on the other hand, in order to be the representative institutions and the voice of cities at the European level. But you also have another player, which is extremely important, which is Eurocities. Eurocities was created in the late 80s, and which is an association, a more grassroots associations, and which gather a lot of, not really capital of European capitals, but mostly the large secondary cities of Europe, like Manchester, like Barcelona, like Lyon, and so on and so forth. And this Eurocities has been very active in the promotion of local authorities' interest at the European level. And since the very beginning, that's what is interesting, is that they put forward integration and immigration as one of the key issues where they can have some legitimacy in the formulation of European policies. In the 2000s, the issue of integration became a European prerogative. It fell into the domain of competence of the European Union. So they designed a policy framework for immigrant integration. And they designed two programs. First, the Urban program from 2000 to 2006, and then the URBACT program, in order to frame the presence and the involvement of cities and city networks within this policy framework. And so, and especially the more the URBACT than the Urban program really put forward the importance of networks and try to promote the networking dynamics among cities on this issue. So it was at that time, for example, that was created the working group on immigration within the Eurocities network. But you also have other networks like CLIP. Sorry, I don't remember the CLIP. Cities for Local Integration Policies, which was created as well in 2006. It's another example of these city networks. And it's only recently, from the 2010s onward, that we observe a surge of these more militant, more assertive networks within Europe. And it's really linked to what Benedict showed about these dispersion policies of asylum seekers on the European territory. It was the case in the UK first, when the government, the Cameron government implemented such a policy. A lot of UK cities found arriving these immigrant populations, and they found, in the City of Sanctuary network, they founded this network in order to foster and to muster their resources and their energy and create a dialogue on this issue. With the arrival of populist leaders, for example, in Italy with Salvini, the creation of city networks arrived at a turning point. Here in Italy, when Salvini tried to implement a decree which was very harsh against immigrants, a lot of several tens and more than 100 Italian cities declared that they would not implement locally this Salvini decree. So this type of networks also picks up during this moment. And of course, 2015, I mentioned, is another turning point with the arrival of this refugee wave from Middle East and Western and Africa. And you have a lot of networks which were created at this moment. And an example is the French one, the ANVITA, Association Nationale des Villes et Territoires Accueillants in France. All right, just to conclude the last slide, please, I would just ask a question, whether the Global Compact for Migration could be a rally point, a point of convergence between all these networks around the world. Because we have observed a strong involvement of the cities and city networks within the formulation and the design of this global compact. For example, the Metropolis or the Global Parliament of Mayors, they're very active. And the local authorities are mentioned more than 11 times in the compact, and they have been acknowledged a very important role for the implementation of this compact. And I would just wonder whether this could form a basis for a common agenda and common instruments for these cities around the world. And also more so that now they enjoy these representative institutions at the global level, like the Mayoral Forum for Mobility and Development, also the Mayors Migration Council, which represents cities and the voice of cities at the UN level on migration issues. So yeah, this could feed into a convergence dynamic around the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. That's wonderful.